You're a burden, Mom, and you can't live with us anymore. Claire dropped the sentence right in the middle of Christmas dinner casually, as if asking for the cranberry sauce. The roast turkey sat half-eaten. The holiday lights twinkled completely at odds with the sudden heavy silence at the table. I set my fork down. I didn't gasp or cry. I simply looked at my 32-year-old daughter. Next to her, my son-in-law David didn't even look up from his plate. "We just need our space," Claire added, waving a hand vaguely. "You're always in the way. David and I want to raise our kids without someone hovering. It's time for you to figure out your own life." I had moved in 4 years ago after my husband passed. They needed help with the down payment. They needed a free nanny and someone to pay for groceries. I had been their chef, their babysitter, and their wallet. Now I was a surplus requirement. "Don't make this a dramatic thing, Mom," Claire sighed. "We're just setting healthy boundaries." Healthy boundaries. Her favorite phrase for getting her way, guilt-free. "All right," I nodded, wiping my mouth. I stood up from the table. Claire frowned, thrown off by my lack of resistance. "All right, that's it." "That's it," I answered, pushing my chair in. "I'll be out of your way." I turned toward the stairs. If they wanted space, they were about to get an ocean of it. I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't waste time tossing and turning either. Once inside my bedroom, I pulled 2 large suitcases from the closet. I moved systematically. Clothes, jewelry, the small framed photo of my late husband. Everything I truly cared about fit neatly into my bags. I didn't pack the expensive coffee maker or the vacuum I had bought for them. Those belonged to the house, and I was done with this house. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the kitchen. "She's probably in there crying," Claire whispered loudly to David. "She'll be apologizing by tomorrow. She just needs to realize she can't run this house anymore." I smiled, snapping my suitcase shut. I wasn't crying. The fog was clearing. I had spent 4 years twisting myself into knots for a daughter who only viewed me as an ATM. At 5 in the morning, the house was pitch black. I loaded my car quietly, not bothering with a dramatic note. I just texted my oldest friend, Martha, coming over. Put the coffee on. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced at the house in the rearview mirror. It felt like a trap I had just escaped. The bubbling sensation in my chest wasn't grief or anger. It was pure relief. When I pulled into Martha's driveway, she was waiting on the porch. "So," Martha smirked, taking one of my bags. "They finally pushed you too far." "They wanted independence, Martha," I said. "I'm going to give them exactly what they asked for." Martha's guest room was small, but it smelled of lavender and had a lock on the door. After a hot shower and a strong cup of coffee, I sat at her dining table and opened my laptop. "Do you want me to go over there and yell at them?" Martha asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. She was fiercely protective, the kind of friend who would gladly slash a tire if I asked her to. "No," I replied, pulling up my password manager. "Yelling doesn't do anything. People like Claire and David only understand one language." I logged into my bank account. The numbers were comforting. Because I lived with them, my expenses had been relatively low aside from the bills I covered. I had a very healthy savings account entirely untouched. Then I opened my utility accounts. When we bought the house, David's credit had been terrible. To get the best rates on utilities, everything was put in my name. The power, the water, the high-speed internet they needed for their remote work days, and endless streaming. I paid them all automatically on the 1st of every month. I clicked into the electric company's portal. I navigated to Stop Service. The prompt asked for a date. I selected today's date. Next was the internet provider. Cancel service. Effective immediately. Water and trash collection followed. I removed my credit card from the shared grocery delivery app that Claire used to order organic snacks for the kids. I logged into the auto insurance portal. I was the primary policyholder on David's SUV because, again, it saved them money. I removed his vehicle from my policy. "What are you doing over there?" Martha asked, watching my face. "Pruning the dead branches," I answered smoothly. I systematically severed every financial tether connecting me to that house. I didn't touch the mortgage. My name wasn't on it anyway, a foolish mistake on my part years ago, but one that now worked to my advantage. They owned the house. Let them figure out how to keep it running. By noon, I was completely untangled from their lives. I closed the laptop, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. I wasn't doing this to be cruel. I was doing it because Claire wanted healthy boundaries. And the healthiest boundary I could think of was keeping my money in my own pocket. "Everything sorted?" Martha asked, setting a plate of sandwiches on the table. "Everything is done." I nodded, picking up a half. "Now we just wait for the first domino to fall. How long do you think it'll take?" I glanced at the clock. It was 1 in the afternoon. Knowing David's gaming habits, the router should shut off right about now. As if on cue, my cell phone sitting on the table buzzed. The screen lit up with Claire's name. I let it ring. The phone rang 3 times before it went to voicemail. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Then came the text messages. "Mom, where are you? The Wi-Fi is down. Did you forget to pay the bill? Mom, call me back. David has a Zoom meeting and the router isn't working." I ignored them all, enjoying my turkey sandwich and the quiet hum of Martha's refrigerator. For 4 years, every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I would drop whatever I was doing to run an errand, pick up a sick kid from school, or fix a problem David was too lazy to handle. Not anymore. At 3 o'clock, the phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't Claire. It was David. That was unusual. He almost never called me directly unless it was an absolute emergency. I picked it up on the second ring. "Hello," I answered, my tone perfectly even. "Laura, finally." David grunted, sounding out of breath. "Where are you? We came home and half your closet is gone." "I moved out," I replied simply. Just like Claire asked. "Okay, look, we can talk about that later." David brushed right past it, his voice tight with annoyance. "The internet is completely shut off. The provider said the account was closed, and Claire just got an email saying the electricity is scheduled for disconnection tomorrow." "What is going on?" "I canceled my accounts, David," I said, leaning back in my chair. Silence stretched over the line. "You... what? Why would you do that?" "Claire made it very clear last night that I am a burden and no longer welcome in your home. It's your home. Therefore, they are your bills. You'll need to set up new accounts in your own names." "Are you insane?" David's voice spiked. "You can't just shut off the power. We have food in the fridge. I have to work." "You're 34 years old, David. Call the power company and set up an account. It takes 10 minutes. They want a $500 deposit because of my credit score," he yelled. "Laura, turn it back on right now. You're being completely unreasonable." "No, I'm being independent," I corrected him. "I'm setting healthy boundaries. I won't be paying for a household I don't live in." "Put Claire on," I heard him mutter in the background, followed by shuffling. "Mom!" Claire shouted into the receiver. "You are acting like a child. You're throwing a tantrum because we asked for some space. Turn the utilities back on right now, or I swear to God." "Or you'll what, Claire?" I interrupted, keeping my voice low and steady. "You'll kick me out." "You already did that." I pressed the red button to end the call. My hand didn't shake. My heart wasn't racing. I felt incredibly calm. I opened my phone settings, found Claire and David's numbers, and blocked them both. I looked up to see Martha watching me from the hallway, a massive grin on her face. "I think," she said. We should open that bottle of wine I've been saving. By Tuesday morning, I had slept better than I had in a decade. I woke up at 6, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat on Martha's porch watching the sunrise. I had a clear plan for the day, and it involved correcting one last lingering issue. 2 years ago, David's old sedan finally died. He had whined for weeks about how he couldn't get to work and how unfair it was that they couldn't afford a new vehicle. Wanting to help, I went to the dealership and bought a lightly used SUV. I paid in full in cash. I let David drive it, assuming it was a family car, but I never signed the title over to him. It was legally entirely mine. "Are you sure you want to do this yourself?" Martha asked, handing me her car keys. She had offered to drive me over, but I preferred to handle my business alone. "I'm sure." I nodded, slipping my spare key to the SUV into my pocket. "It's my car. I'm just going to pick it up." Martha gave me a ride and dropped me off at the corner of my old street at 7:30. The neighborhood was quiet, the frost still heavy on the lawns. I walked the half-block to Claire and David's house. The SUV was sitting in the driveway, right where David always parked it. The house looked completely dark, likely because the power company had followed through on my cancellation order yesterday. I didn't sneak around. I walked straight up the driveway, my boots crunching softly on the concrete. I took out my key, unlocked the doors, and climbed into the driver's seat. It smelled like stale French fries and David's cheap cologne. I wrinkled my nose, made a mental note to get it detailed, and started the engine. The roar of the motor was loud in the quiet morning air. I glanced at the front window of the house. The curtains twitched. I saw a shadow move. I didn't wave. I didn't wait. I simply put the car in reverse, backed out of the driveway, and drove away. I drove straight to a nearby mechanic shop I trusted. I parked in the lot, walked inside, and handed the keys to the manager, a nice man named Greg, who knew my late husband. "Morning, Laura." Greg smiled. "What can I do for you?" "I need the locks changed, the ignition rekeyed, and a full interior detail," I told him, sliding my credit card across the counter. "No rush. Take your time." "Lost your spare?" he asked sympathetically. "Something like that?" I replied. I called an Uber to take me back to Martha's. As I rode in the back seat, watching the city wake up, I realized I had reclaimed every single piece of myself that they had taken. My time, my money, my property. I was whole again. Now the rest was entirely up to them. The fallout was predictable, yet incredibly satisfying to watch from a distance. Since I had blocked their numbers, they had no direct way to scream at me, so they resorted to email. I opened my laptop after lunch to find my inbox flooded. Urgent. Where is the car? Did you steal David's car? He missed work today. Mom, this isn't funny anymore. Bring the car back right now. The kids need to get to school. I took a sip of my tea and composed a single brief reply. Claire, I picked up my vehicle this morning. As you know, the registration and title are in my name. Since I no longer live with you, I need my car for my own transportation. You and David will need to make other arrangements. Best, Mom. I hit send and closed the laptop. Later that evening, Martha came back from running errands with a story. She had run into a mutual acquaintance at the grocery store who lived 2 doors down from Claire. Apparently, Martha laughed, taking off her coat. David was pacing the driveway in his bathrobe this morning, screaming on the phone. The neighbor said they saw an electrical company truck out there around noon. Guess they had to pay that deposit after all. Good, I nodded. They need to learn how the real world operates. Are you worried they might try to come here? Martha asked, looking toward the front door. Let them. I shrugged. They can't force me to pay their bills. They can't force me to hand over my car keys. They have absolutely zero leverage. For the first time in her life, Claire was facing the consequences of her own actions. She had assumed that because I was a widow, because I was older, I was weak. She thought my financial support was a given, an endless well she could draw from while treating me like dirt. She had miscalculated entirely. That night, I sat by the window in Martha's guest room, looking out at the stars. I wasn't sad. I didn't miss the chaos of that house. I missed my grandchildren, yes, but I knew Claire would use them as pawns if I tried to reach out now. I had to stay strong. If I folded, I would go right back to being their unpaid servant. My phone dinged with a notification from my bank. It was an alert. Someone had just tried to charge $300 to the joint credit card I used to keep open for emergencies. I smiled, opened the banking app, and permanently closed the account. The transaction was declined. Reality was finally setting in for them. And I was just getting started on my new life. By Thursday, the situation escalated exactly as I anticipated. I was sitting in Martha's living room reading a book when a frantic pounding shook the front door. Martha was out at her garden club, so I was alone. I stood up, walked to the hallway, and looked through the peephole. Claire was standing on the porch, looking wildly out of place. Her hair was a mess, she was wearing sweatpants, and she looked furious. I unlocked the door and opened it just a few inches, leaving the heavy chain engaged. "What do you want, Claire?" I asked calmly. "Open the door, Mom," she demanded, pushing against the wood. It didn't budge. "Are you out of your mind? I tried to buy groceries this morning and the card was declined. I had a cart full of food and I had to walk away in front of everyone." "That account is closed," I replied, keeping my voice even. "I told you I am no longer funding your household." "How are we supposed to eat?" she shrieked, her face turning red. "David's paycheck went entirely to paying the utility deposits to get the lights back on. We have no money for food for the kids." "David has a good job. You both need to learn how to budget," I said. "Maybe you should return that designer purse you bought last month or cancel a few of your streaming services." "You are starving your own grandchildren," she accused, trying the guilt trip that had worked so many times before. I didn't flinch. "I am not starving anyone. If the children are truly hungry, you can bring them here and I will make them dinner. But I am not giving you or David another dime, and I am not paying for your organic meal deliveries. You are adults. Act like it." "You're horrible." Claire spat, tears finally welling in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of pure, frustrated entitlement. "You're supposed to help us." "I did help you," I corrected her gently. "For 4 years. And in return, you told me I was a burden and threw me out on Christmas. You wanted me out of your life. I simply obliged." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for a comeback. She found none. "Go home, Claire," I said quietly. "Figure it out." I closed the door gently in her face, sliding the deadbolt into place. I walked back to the living room, picked up my book, and found my page. My hands weren't shaking. I felt incredibly grounded. The umbilical cord was finally permanently severed. I couldn't stay with Martha forever. By Monday, I had signed a lease for a ground-floor 2-bedroom condo in a quiet, 55 and older community. It was perfect. A small patio, large windows, and a space entirely mine. My excellent credit and untouched savings made the approval process practically instantaneous. I spent the week furnishing it with things that didn't fit a chaotic family life. A glass coffee table, a pristine white sofa, expensive Egyptian cotton sheets. Every purchase was a quiet celebration of my independence. Martha helped me unpack on Thursday. We were sharing a glass of wine when my laptop chimed from the counter. An email from Claire. "Mom, David got a warning at work because of the car situation. The mortgage is due next week and we don't have enough. Please, can you just come back? We need you." I stared at the screen. "We need you. Not We love you. They just needed their safety net back. I deleted the email and emptied the trash bin. I wasn't going backward. A few days later, a frantic knock came at my door. I checked the peephole. It was Claire. She looked exhausted. Her clothes wrinkled dark circles under her eyes. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind me. I wasn't letting her inside my sanctuary. "Martha told me where you were," Claire mumbled, tears spilling over. "Mom, we're going to lose the house. David's paycheck isn't enough. Please. I'm sorry about Christmas. If you just help us with this month's mortgage, we can figure it out." I looked at my daughter. The guilt trip was familiar, but I felt only a mild pity. "I forgive you for what you said, Claire," I told her honestly. "But I am not paying your mortgage. If you can't afford that house, you need to downsize to an apartment. That is how life works. You're choosing yourself over your family," she whispered, looking at me like I was a stranger. "Yes." I nodded without hesitation. "For the first time, I am. You should try doing the same for your own household." I turned the handle to my door. "When you're ready to have a relationship that doesn't involve my checkbook, you know where to find me." I went inside and locked the door. 6 months passed. The winter thawed into a beautiful spring. Through Martha's neighborhood network, I learned Claire and David sold the house just before the bank could foreclose. They downsized to a cramped apartment, and Claire was forced to take a weekend retail job. They were finally acting like responsible adults simply because they had no other choice. In May, my phone buzzed with a text from a new number. "Mom, it's Claire. The kids are asking about you. Would you want to get a coffee? Just us. No demands. Just an invitation." We met at a busy cafe halfway between our homes. Claire looked tired, but much more grounded. The designer purse was gone. We talked for 20 minutes about the weather and the kids' school. I didn't offer to babysit. I didn't offer to pay for her coffee. When we parted ways in the parking lot, she hugged me awkwardly. "We miss you." "I'll see you around, Claire," I replied smoothly. I drove back to my quiet condo, locked the door, and sank into my white couch. I had lost a house, but I had gained an empire of peace. I was nobody's burden, and I was nobody's wallet. I was simply Laura. And finally, that was more than enough.